My name is Dave Ripplinger. I'm the Bioenergy and Bioproducts Economic Specialist with NDSU Extension. Today I'm going to provide some quick comments on what's been going on in the energy industry, especially as it pertains to North Dakota. I'm going to talk about three things, given the brief amount of time we have. First of all, what's been going on with oil production within the state. Next, I'm going to talk about something that may impact you as a buyer of diesel, as a farmer in North Dakota, as it relates to refinery cracks. And then finally, I'll talk about some new opportunities that are starting to come up apparent to many of us in industry with the renewable diesel market in California and elsewhere. So just to revisit where we've been, this chart is a little bit long-lived and shows production of crude oil in North Dakota with the blue line, and then finally the rig count in the orange line. And so we can see that dramatic boom in 2010, which lasted through 2014, recovery in 2017, and then in March and April, that rapid decline in production first, and then rig count soon afterwards, as COVID-19 started making impacts on the economy. Stay-at-home orders, limits on movement, less interest to travel, all of those things really hit kind of quickly. On the gasoline side, on the diesel side, it was a little bit later where we saw a decrease in freight movements in the state, which is driven primarily by diesel. If you look kind of in that the last bit of the chart, you see that recovery of production. And these numbers are just a bit dated now. You know, we have numbers through the end of August, and things are continuing to recover in terms of production, but the rig count is very low. It's about 10 right now, which is not anywhere near the levels we've seen in the last decade. So there's obviously implications there for the state economy, for jobs, income tax, wealth creation, and the like. Here's a chart of West Texas Intermediate and Brent crude oil. So WTI is the North American benchmark. So this chart shows that movement in prices, and you can see it really kind of follows along with North Dakota production levels, including that high level of those high prices from 2010 through 14, the decline, the recovery, and then the kind of the collapse this year. As you can see in this chart, these are actually spot prices. So we actually see that decline in April, but of course, if you were following the markets, there was a day in April for the futures contract where the nearby was negative $37, and so that was kind of a short-lived thing. But again, you know, these prices are lower than they have been in recent history, and right now we're hovering right around $40 a barrel for WTI, which again, as the North American benchmark, is much more important for petroleum buyers. Or for those involved in the industry here in North America. One of the reasons I bring that up is to segue into two charts that the Dallas Fed provides. The first is the break-even cost, or the break-even revenue price that's needed for a new well to be drilled. So these numbers actually, the survey results were released just prior to COVID really coming online in March, but I think they still hold. And so by different basin, so you see Permian, Eagle Ford, and Bakken there in red. You know, these are the numbers that on average the folks in the business need to start a new well. $51. You know, I just mentioned that we're at right around $40. We've been there for a few months now, relatively stable at that level. So clearly below that number needed to be actively, drilling new wells. You know, there is a bit of a range on that, but and it does go down to 40-ish, but clearly not the market price today is not what's needed for there to be a complete recovery and additional drilling in North Dakota. This number is similar. This is the break-even costs for shutting in an existing well. And so this would be essentially stopping production of a well that's already online. And so we did see this in the spring. And the survey numbers here, again, this came out just before, so you think it would hold. Below $28 would lead these firms to shut in wells. And of course, we were below $28. That happened, and now we're above $28. And we see that recovery in production, as well as some limited activity in terms of new wells being drilled. Dovetailing or moving into what this might mean to you, there's been a significant amount of disruption in the petroleum markets and transportation fuel market in the last year. And this actually will likely continue to work in the advantage of the farmer, or in general, the diesel buyer. And so kind of walking through what happens in terms of a barrel of crude as it's being refined, and the need to balance out the different products, which in some respect are dependent, or at least initially dependent, on the type of oil being used. So, in a traditional oil refinery, we put crude oil into a distillation tower, we heat it up, and we have these different products that come off it based on boiling point. So we're definitely familiar with gasoline and diesel. We're familiar with kerosene. That's actually essentially jet fuel. And then all these different products. And so there's kind of these natural splits just coming off the distillation tower. And that's fine. And then afterwards, we can make some changes. We can transform gasoline into diesel, or vice versa, at a cost. There's technology that does this. Many refineries have it, but it's not something you necessarily want to do. And this gets really important because what we've seen in the actual use of these different fuels. So these charts show products supplied. So this is coming from the refinery to that next stage in the market. So you can almost think of it as wholesale demand or quantity demanded. So we have distillate, which is diesel, oil, gasoline, and kerosene. And the numbers to really to look at are that decline. So that first number with parentheses moving from left to right, and then the last number on the far right with parentheses. So if you look at distillate fuel oil, use fell by almost 40%, but then for the most part, it's recovered to about 86% of what it was pre-COVID. Gasoline, quite similar. Use fell by almost half within weeks and has recovered and been relatively stable, again, right around that 86% mark where we were. The problem is it was with kerosene or jet fuel. If you've been following the airline industry, was for the most part shut down for much of the summer, and is slowly coming back online. But passenger travel by air, business travel by air is nowhere where it was. And in fact, we can look at these numbers and see that it fell by 80%, and then it's risen now to only half of what it was before. And this is important because if you think about that distillation tower, we have those natural splits in terms of the product that's coming out, and we're producing too much jet fuel off the distillation tower. And so we need that to go somewhere, and the natural home is to convert that into diesel fuel, and that's fine and well, but that means that we're going to have even more diesel fuel. And that's one of those reasons why we think there's going to be, downward pressure on diesel price moving forward. And so really, bearish, looking at, buying fuel for planting, going into 2021, there's really not much optimism on upward movement in prices, especially driven by this phenomenon. And again, I don't think anyone expects that air travel is going to dramatically pick up in the next few months. The last thing I'm going to talk about is carbon and renewable diesel. I'm going to start again talking about California Air Resources Board. So California, for about a decade, has been a leader in the development and implementation and use of policy to support carbon reduction. They happen to be a little bit more sensitive to greenhouse gas emissions than many other places in the world, many other states in the union. But they've developed a cap and trade system which incentivizes lower carbon fuels. And this is really interesting because the system's been in place now for almost a decade, and it's really proven. There's been legal cases. There's been a lot of market turmoil like there is in markets, as you'd expect, over a decade. And their system is standing up really well. And the reason I bring this up is because many of the biofuels that we look at are lower carbon. And so as this price of carbon emerges, and it happens to be at a very high level, it's something that farmers should take note of and be ready for to take advantage. And just to kind of walk through, so this chart is the price of carbon in California over the last 7 years. And the thing I kind of want to bring to your attention is what's highlighted, and that is that the price of carbon in California for the last few years, including during that rapid decline, that COVID collapse, if you will, in April, it was still around $200 a metric ton. And, that dollar amount, that measure probably doesn't mean much to you. For me, just to kind of give you a sense, I always thought if it was ever more than $20 a ton that I'd take note. And now it's an order of magnitude higher, and definitely adding up to extra cents, nickels, dimes, quarters on low carbon fuel. And so this is important for those of us who produce corn, going into corn ethanol. But actually, what's getting even more exciting is what's happening on the fat side, on the lipid side, and that's where we segue into renewable diesel. So renewable diesel is a fuel produced using a bio-based feedstock, a bio-based lipid, so vegetable oil, grease, fat. So this could be soybean oil. It could be grease or fat from a rendering plant, a slaughterhouse, or the like. And it's put through some technology that you typically have at a crude oil refinery. This works out really nicely for two reasons. One is it meets the diesel spec, so there's no blend wall, and there's not really a hard blend wall with biodiesel, traditional biodiesel, but with this, there's none. And most importantly, it has a really small carbon footprint. And so with that really small carbon footprint, you can get more of that $200 per metric ton credit back. And there's this huge incentive to do this. The answer to the question at the top of the slide, the recent price of renewable diesel in California is $7.25. And so if you think back to the price of diesel here in the Dakotas, or even the price of diesel in California, there's an extreme premium on this. And so right now within agriculture, there's a search high and low for more lipids. So for more oils, greases, and fats, either that aren't being made use of, or that might be able to come online. And the market in California is essentially almost untapped. There's a lot of growth there, to say nothing of the potential spread of similar policies around the country. So you're hearing a lot of interest. I get calls almost weekly, just asking for the lowdown of what's available in the upper Midwest in terms of these feedstocks. And it also leads to, what other feedstocks could we produce? We talk about vegetable oils, so soybean and canola oil are the two dominant sources of vegetable oil for biodiesel, and also the first place to start for renewable diesel is soybean oil. We're actually seeing this come to fruition really quick. If you haven't been paying attention, a Marathon plant in Dickinson is being converted, and actually within the next few weeks it will be running. They're starting up right now, and that refinery is not particularly large, but it will be producing renewable diesel. We'll be sourcing certain feedstock, but they're continuing to look for different lower carbon feedstocks. And again, this seems to be one of those neat marriages, one of many that's kind of come up from this COVID disruption, where the petroleum industry and the biofuels industry, who've for the most part not been allied in activities, now certainly are, where they're looking for ways that they can work together and to either make use of technology or to do things to ensure that the internal combustion engine continues to dominate. So those are my comments for today. I'm happy to answer any questions. You can, and always you can call me or send me an email, and I'd be happy to chat. Thanks.